Well, let's talk about energy. Dan Walton, you've had some comments to make today about a new tax on gas companies. Can I ask you about that? Domestic gas reservation. Why does WA have this and the rest of Australia doesn't? And nuclear power. And then perhaps I can get the Treasurer to respond.
Thanks very much for that, Andrew. I don't know why the West Australians were smarter than the rest of us, but they were. For those of you who don't know, in Australia we are the world's largest exporter of gas, and we pay some of the world's highest prices. We're the only gas-producing nation in the world that does not have a mechanism in some way, shape or form to keep a proportion of our gas in Australia to benefit Australians. That is what we have. Unfortunately, successive governments of both sides, both persuasions, have failed to put in place any mechanism to make sure that this is properly dealt with. So we have, for many, many years, called for a reservation policy. In Western Australia, they keep 15% of their gas. That is, it has to be offered to the domestic market in the beginning, and if they're unable to find customers for that gas, they're able to sell it elsewhere. We have said that there should be a similar policy in place. Now, the crisis that we have now is so severe, and I believe is going to run for so long, that even more drastic action has to take place. You will have, in the next panel, both Kevin Gallagher and Frank Calabria from Origin and Santos say to you, as they have for me, and we've argued this for the last 10 years, there should be no intervention, no change, no mechanisms on price. There should be no windfall tax, which we called for today. And the whole time they've said that, it's come at the cost of businesses, particularly manufacturers, who use gas as a feedstock to make their product. So it's gas to make products like glass, like chemicals, like fertilisers. All of them need gas as a feedstock, and they have fundamentally failed to properly address the problem we've got. So right now, I know the energy ministers are meeting in the next couple of hours. I've said they need to break glass and hit the emergency button, because you look at Europe, Europe is moving away from Russian gas, whether we like it or not. They are not going to buy Russian gas long into the future. They're going to be looking around the rest of the world for gas, and Australia will become a good and reliable place. So we've said we should put a windfall tax in. Last week I was in London, woke up in the morning, Boris Johnson introduced a windfall tax, 25% on all the super profits. They also said, as part of that, that they would subsidise investments, that is bringing additional supply into the market, which we support. And I think we should also have a look. We've got a pipeline monopoly in this country where they essentially gouge more than just about any other nation in the world the cost of transmitting our gas around various states.
Right, and just quickly on nuclear.
As you know, as everyone knows, I've been a massive supporter for nuclear for a long period of time. I grew up in the Sutherland Shire, as some others have on this stage. I think I've turned out okay. I'm not... a lawyer has as well. Both of us having grown up in the Shire. The whole fear and doom and gloom about nuclear is completely nonsense. I think it's the rhetoric of the past. But having said that, I've been a big supporter and a big advocate for a long period of time. But as time evolves and the technology evolves, I think it is harder to see a solution where nuclear plays a more active role in this country. I would love to it have happened already, but I think the development of hydrogen and others and battery storage will likely overtake the demand for it here.
And I'm guessing, Treasurer, that you're not a big fan of the tax after your previous experience in such matters. Nuclear energy, why doesn't that progress in Australia? But the one that sticks out at the moment is this prospect of a domestic gas reservation. What's stopping you and Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese just going for that in the next couple of months?
Well, first of all, on the nuclear front, the reason that I'm not keen on nuclear energy for Australia is because the economics don't stack up. I don't think that they have actually ever stacked up in Australia, but particularly the case some of these cleaner and cheaper opportunities the economics have become so compelling for Australia as the modelling that all of us have done in different ways has shown. And so I think I've never been a supporter of nuclear power. Dan and I have spoken about this on many occasions over a really long period of time now. My opposition is economic rather than kind of ideological. When it comes to some of these other measures, I mean, I agree with Dan that this is an emergency. And that's why, whether it's Chris Bowen, myself, Madeleine King, the Resources Minister, Ed Husic, the Industry Minister, the Prime Minister, we've tried not to rule out various steps that have been proposed to us. We're not progressing the windfall tax idea. That's not something that we've been working on. There are issues around, obviously, the trigger, the so-called gas trigger and other interventions in the market, which a government of either political persuasion has available to them. All we've pointed out in the last little while when we think about this, and Dan's right, the energy ministers are meeting very soon. I'm meeting the energy regulator today. I've been talking with the ACCC to make sure the pricing structures are all above board. There are things that we need to do, but even if you took some of the steps that Dan has just described to us, they wouldn't have an immediate effect. You know, the trigger wouldn't come in until next year. So we've just made that point. We haven't ruled it out. We haven't decided to pull the trigger. We've just pointed out that the way it's currently set up, it wouldn't have immediate effect. Same with the opening up of new gas fields, same with some of the other solutions which have been proposed. This emergency is incredibly near term, and so we need to be considering, as the regulators have been, things like price caps and guarantees, and all of that are entirely appropriate. Some of these other steps wouldn't come into effect in time to alleviate pressure in the next couple of months.
Why can't Australia be in the same position as WA? You know, in terms of this gas that's set aside, it just seems ludicrous that we're producing all this gas and we can't guarantee a decent price here.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've said, you know, as a Labor Party in opposition and now in government, you know, we have said that when it comes to gas reservation, we're up for a conversation about it. Right, and you know, our party platform, as Dan knows, talks about gas reservation. You know, I'm meeting Mark McGowan this afternoon. One of the issues we'll talk about, no doubt, will be what they've been able to do out west. But the point that I'm making is, well, first of all, there are a whole series of constraints, contractual and otherwise, that exist in the market already. But even if we went down this path, it's not something that would solve this emergency that we confront right now.
Jennifer? Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of things. So I think the first thing is we've got to distinguish between retrospective reservation and prospective reservation. If we could get the debate at least centred around that. I mean, the idea that you would retrospectively start asking companies to redirect existing contracts, that will set a very bad policy precedent around the country. The second thing we need to do is to draw a line in the sand about this absurd debate about the role of gas. Gas is the transition to net zero because those other technologies, pumped hydro, battery, are not at scale and at price to make that transition. And our eye has got to be on the prize, which is emissions reduction. Gas is 50% more efficient in emissions terms than coal. We've got to start getting a long-term perspective on that, and we've got to kind of remember why we are where we are. You know, moratoriums on gas. Kevin's planning approval to get Narrabri working has taken, you know, nearly a decade and has been subject to endless legal challenges. So, and on the super profits tax, let's just, first of all, the government's ruled it out, and that's probably where the conversation should end. But I mean, we want these companies reinvesting in Australia. They are going to be the anchor to the clean energy economy, to the diversification. And how much more tax do we seriously want companies to pay? And we've already got a range of super profit taxes. Third highest company tax rate in the world, $111 billion of company tax receipts last year, which powered up the budget. PRRT, which is going to get up to $2.4 billion in the next 2 years, $5.4 billion of royalties. I mean, really, you know, 10 companies pay $26 billion of all of that company tax. I mean, we already have a super profits tax, a range of them in Australia, and at some point you start to kill the goose and you start to own goal the country by deterring these companies from investing. And we should be really pleased that these companies are making big profits because they have underpinned the strength of the economy during COVID. So we've got to have a very careful conversation about these things. We are not the United Kingdom. We have a very different economy.
Sure.
And we've got to be very careful about copycatting things that come out of the UK.